So this session for Lunch and Learn is one in a series, an ongoing series for us as a partnership between Boost, which is the learning and improvement community for North East and North Cumbria. So we welcome anybody, well, from anywhere really, but we specifically target our health and care staff in our region. And anybody who works or volunteers in health and care is free to join any of these Boost sessions. And this is in partnership with the NHS Knowledge and Library Service. So the Library Service in North Cumbria do a great job of supporting us. Thanks, Barbara. Good stuff. So let's crack on. If you haven't been before, I'll just flash up a couple of slides just to get us going. Obviously, don't need to read those out to you. This is really dipping our toe in the water of co-production. At the end of the session, I'll signpost us to some wider resources and also our much more lengthy co-production sessions that we've got, which are 2-hour virtual sessions, and I'll just reference those at the end. So, but this will hopefully give you a flavour and a taster. We will have an opportunity just to ask a few questions if you want to at the end. So here's our rules of engagement for today. Really just the main thing to say there is we'll crack on with the presentation, and if we've got any questions, we'll pick them up at the end, towards the end of the session. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Sheila. So let's launch straight in, and we'll welcome anybody else along if they come along. So and I suppose I wanted to set the context for co-production because you know, co-production is a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? I suppose in a way it does what it says on the tin, but then again it does feel a little bit like management speak. And I think this, in terms of mindset, this session will be quite hard for you if you don't subscribe to what we've put there, which is that you know, the people and communities actually know what's right for them, and we're obviously part of our communities as well, aren't we, in terms of what we need in health and care. And you know, this is the backbone really of what we're talking about when we launch into this co-production session today. So put simply then, when we're thinking about building or improving services, I think traditionally, well, hopefully traditionally, we'll be thinking about this type of stuff. We want to create an optimal value for people that use our services, but generally we're thinking about at the point of service, you know, so be it as acute or secondary care, particularly in health, but also social care, care homes, that type of thing. We'd be thinking about how do we get this balance between safe care, effective care, and the best experience. And sometimes they can jar with each other, and that's where that real person-centered approach comes in, because what's a best experience for an individual might not necessarily fit with what a practitioner sees as effective care, for example. So that is quite often our starting point for thinking about co-production. And of course, you know, if we think about the concept of start well, live well, age well, and then amongst that, what really matters to us, you know, that personalised care approach and working together on that personalised care approach is really important. Myself and a couple of colleagues that are here today were at a really inspiring palliative and end-of-life care event, regional event last week, where you know, those that were in the room were really talking about actually what does it mean to have to end well and have a really good end-of-life experience, and how do we really listen in terms of care plans. And that is, you know, co-production in a way, isn't it, around actually, do we have like a strong care plan for individuals, as an example. But what I want to do in this short session is take us a little bit more upstream from this and consider where true co-production might start. So if you like, that whole prevention rather than cure approach. And hopefully you'll be able to see that visual in front of you. On the right-hand side is the reality, and the references for this will be at the end of the presentation, of you know, what we spend on being healthy Put in quite simple terms. We tend to medicalise what's going on in terms of keeping us right, whereas actually what we really know from the evidence is the stuff on the left around what makes us healthy, and just that tiny bit at the top, which might be a little bit tricky to see. It's a bit blurry, sorry about that. The red bit is that tiny tip of the iceberg, but the rest of it is about, the healthy behaviours. Yes, some of it's genetics, but the importance of our environment as well around what makes us healthy. So when we co-produce, then what are we really after? Yes, it's about improving our current services or building current services, but it's about much more than that. It's like I say, it's about kind of going a bit more upstream and thinking about the prevention rather than cure. And we'll have a quick look at that today. So I want to introduce to you, if you don't already know Cormac Russell, to some work amongst other people of Cormac Russell sees himself as a social explorer. He's worked all over the world on community-based projects, sorry, and he talks a lot about what you might have heard of, this ABCD model. So this asset-based community development. Again, kind of management speak, but it's quite simple around where's our starting point for working with communities. And these are the 5 areas that he talks about. So he talks about being citizen led. What is it that residents and communities are best placed to do together? Potentially with some outside help, but what can they drive in terms of what makes for that really good environment for people to flourish and have good well-being, and what do they need outside agencies to do? But if we start with the bit about what do outside agencies need to do, then we'll get the same answers that we're getting all of the time at the moment. Things like we can't get access to GP, we can't get access to dental services, those sorts of things. So that's why it's really important to flip it and think about what is it that residents and communities are best placed to do together. Yeah, and that leads into that second point, which is about being asset based. We quite often focus on what's wrong. What we're subscribing to here is thinking about what's strong. What is strong in our communities? What are our assets? What are the things that we can really will help us to build a strong and healthy community? And we'll talk about that again in a sec. So place-based, what area are you focusing on? Is it too big? We know that relational power at neighbourhood level is really, really powerful and important. So to be able to say when we're co-producing, actually who are we doing it with? Over what base are we doing that? And do we need to make that much more specific around making improvements and working with communities? Then we've got relationship oriented there. This is about the power of relationships outside of the workplace. And we know that, don't we? In terms of social movements, this still happens all over the world. So how do we build relationships in communities to help make change and really influence change? And then that last one there, inclusion. How do you really create a space for everyone to step into? Not just the loudest or the most socially acceptable groups. How do you adapt socially to welcome everybody to be involved in making changes? That's a whole other session in itself, and Booster developing something around that at the moment. And then I said we would just briefly touch on assets again. And here, Cormac Russell talks about 6 types of assets that contribute to the collective well-being of a community. Obviously, you can see those there. So, and when we're thinking about co-producing, are we really thinking about, where are those assets? Where are the strengths? What can we tap into? And also, what are the stories? What are the stories of the local community? What's the culture of the local community? Because that's part of what the assets are in terms, again, of how we make people healthy and happy. And I guess just by way of a summary of that, then just flash this one up here, and we talk about fertilizing the soil. And there's a reference to some work from Dave Hyam, which is referenced at the end of this presentation, which really talks about creating the right conditions for people to be able to thrive. Otherwise, we'll just continue to do the cure, to try and cure. As opposed to saying, okay, what can we do around prevention and people helping themselves to keep healthy? So the community is the soil in which such problems grow or fail to grow, and in which the resolutions to such problems thrive or fail to thrive. So, wouldn't be a lunch and learn without a definition. So, here we go then. So here's one definition of what co-production is. I think it fits the purpose today. And yeah, I'll just leave you to read that for a second. Obviously, don't need to read that out to you. So co-production acknowledges that people with lived experience of a particular condition are often best placed to advise on what support and services will make a positive difference to their lives throughout the whole of their journey with that condition. And I guess we should say that co-production is part of a range of approaches, which might include things like citizen involvement, which is slightly different, participation, engagement, and consultation. Again, all of which is quite management speaky, but it's really important to focus for us as leaders, if we're involved with delivering co-production, actually, what do we really mean? And are we actually really co-producing? And that's what I want to go on to for the second part of this presentation. This slide here talks about authentic engagement and speaks to really the whole aspect of power, um, and how you might and want to and notice addressing the power imbalance in any co-production activities that you might do, because there will be power imbalances going on and perceived power imbalances going on all over the place. How do you create an environment where people can step into, be themselves, be authentic, and really contribute in an equal way to the decision making that you're doing, the design work that you're doing, and the participation that you're asking them to get involved with? It's a really tricky thing that we don't tend to pay enough attention to. So, for example, what are the spaces that you use to co-produce? Are you doing it virtually? Are you doing it in person? How do you greet people? How do you allow people to really know that what they know within them is worthy of contributing, and give them the confidence to be able to do that? This, if you haven't seen it before, I think is, I really like this slide. It's a really powerful slide, because this to me is the almost your sense check on actually what is it we want to do right up front? What is it we're actually doing? And it does that fit, with where we are in terms of our service design or redesign or improvements that we might want to make. And quite often we think we're co-producing when we're not co-producing. So there's quite a simple way of looking at that kind of doing to, doing for, and doing with. Now, even the doing to, we're not suggesting that we're not doing that benevolently, but that's still what we're doing. It's passive. It's kind of that parent-child approach to helping people improve their lives. But some of that is sometimes needed and appropriate and necessary. We could argue, is coercion ever the right thing to do? But things like smoking cessation, when we're trying to encourage people to stop smoking, we may well use coercion, but we know it's not a tactic that's really going to get us to where we need to be. And then we've got this piece in the middle, which I suspect a lot of us quite often sit, even though we might aspire to do the doing with, perhaps without even realizing we're doing that doing for. And that's okay. Not saying that it's wrong to be in any of these spaces, but it's about noticing it and saying, I am deliberately forming a strategy and a way of working that's going to help us to do with, or do for. We do a lot of engagement and consultation, don't we? And we involve people further down the line. But if we really want to co-produce and co-design, we've got to do that right up front, right at the start, and have a collective involved in conversations right from day one. So, and I suppose this backs up the last slide. to, again, in terms of doing a sense check organisationally as a leader who might be involved with this. So if we are going out to our citizens, out to the public, out to service users and saying, this is what I've done, arguably that's a briefing. If we're saying, this is what I've done or want to do, what do you think? Nothing wrong with that, but that's engaging. It's not co-production. What are the options and which ones do you think we should take? Classic consultation. Let's get together to discuss the problem and see if we can agree on what we ought to. That's much closer to co-production, and but we might call that joint problem solving. Can we reach a deal on what to do as negotiations? So but again, I flashed that up because I think it's worth us actually calling out what it is we're doing and then deciding organisationally or as a system, is this the way that we want to work in terms of working with our communities? Classic picture here. It's easy to give people what they don't want, isn't it? And so we take away the user experience as at our peril. And just an opportunity here to stop for a second and reflect on. So where are you as an individual, as a leader in this work, organisation? Where's your organisation? Where are we systemically in terms of what our mindset is for co-production? And what this is suggesting is an open mindset around saying, actually, I've come to this for the greater good because I do want, irrespective of the price I might pay individually or organisationally, to be involved with making things better in a certain service or in a certain area. And so why would people not have an open mindset to that? And this is, I suppose, to flash up that we can fall into a kind of collaborating for my own cause approach, excuse me, to fit my own team or my organisation's agenda. So, we want to, obviously we want something in it for us, but sometimes it's about the give rather than the get. So we would like to think that on that right-hand side of an inward mindset, there's not, there's hardly anybody, and certainly nobody I've ever met in health and care, that have got a deliberate self-focus in terms of what they might want to get out of collaborative working. But it may well be that we say we'll collaborate as long as it ticks our own internal boxes and as long as it gets done what's on my to-do list, as opposed to I should be involved with this piece of work because I'm a key stakeholder, and actually other services or individuals might benefit more than I do, but that's the right way to go about this as a system. And I know that's hard because we have our own senior stakeholders that we've to answer to, but it's to notice that and wonder, is that what's getting in the way of us truly working in a systemic way? Because we need to have very clear shared goals on this. So what can you do? What do you want to do? What might be good questions for you to think about? And this might be a starting point. So what do I need to do to create the right environment as a leader? How do I set a psychologically safe space for people to step into and make sure I'm inviting the right people in the right way, in the right environment, to be able to get the most out of people and organisations and systems? What do I need to do to build relationships ready for co-production? There's a fair amount of warming up that quite often needs to be done, and we tend to launch right into just bringing people along to a venue, say, look, this is what we want to do, let's get on with it, as opposed to maybe perhaps creating the right conditions in advance of that so that people feel much more confident when they step into that space. I personally get involved with integrated care communities in North Cumbria, and there are 8 integrated care communities where there are a cohort of people who work in health and care and social care and the third sector, and also community members. So they might be from the Rotary Club, they might be from a sports club, they might be from a school, they might be citizens, the retired citizens who want to get involved with making improvements. And I've sat in groups before where we talk, the language we talk is not helpful to people, and people are perhaps sat there scratching their heads and thinking about, well, what can I meaningfully contribute to this? What do I know that's going to be helpful? Well, how do we ask the right questions and create a space where people will feel confident enough to speak up, and we get those, we get those nuggets of experience. And also, where's my own personal mindset on this, which we've just talked about. So this is such a short session, just really 20 minutes for a presentation. So there's only so much we can do. But so where do we get started? So we've talked about the mindset piece, me as a leader, how do I get myself ready to start this work? Other things you might want to consider. It's probably a no-brainer, but is so important to say, be clear about what you want. What problem are you trying to solve, and what problem are you agreeing that you're collectively trying to solve? And which part of that problem are you trying to solve? There's so much in health and care, isn't there? And even if it's to do with the pathway, which part of that pathway might you be looking at? Commit to, this is quite controversial, but commit to co-producing wholly, or at least be honest about the fact that you're not co-producing, and that's about being honest, going back to that whole Arnstein's ladder around where am I, are we doing with, alongside, what is it we really want to do here, because it requires investment and it requires continued investment. How will you reach people? And we talk about hard to reach people, don't we? And that often gets challenged quite rightly, which is, it's not about being hard to reach people, it's the fact that we don't try hard enough to reach people so that we get a good diverse mix of people using services. And then how will you communicate with them? How will you collectively create a safe space? So that's everybody's, responsibility in that, not just somebody that's leading a piece of work. How do you all work in a certain way, and how do you commit to working in that way? How will you listen and ensure that outward mindset, that greater good piece, which is so hard to, achieve sometimes? And how will you facilitate the discussions? So important, even though it's right at the end of this little slide here. How do you feed it back? How do you complete that loop? If people are committing their time and their energy and their emotions to sharing their stories, how do you share that back with people? How do you show people collectively how you're moving forward and the things that you're doing? So just some killer questions really to get people started. And by way of summary then, I've just put their relationships are everything. Everything is relational when it comes to co-production. So really, really don't see that as the last thing on the list. See that as the first thing on the list, about how the process by which you go about building relationships and keep people, involved in a really compassionate and inclusive way. Here, where it says Art of Hosting, you may or may not have heard of an organisation called the Art of Hosting. This is just one example, but I've put it up, and when you get sent the slides, there's a hyperlink in there. But you can just Google Art of Hosting. Some really good resources around how you bring people together in spaces and use asset-based activities to be able to get the best out of people. So I've just flashed that up there and singled that one out because hopefully that's helpful. Some resources there. I'm not on commission for Amazon, but Cormac, I've just given you a link there to Cormac Russell around that ABCD model, and some other connections there to things that we've talked about as part of this session. So I'm just going to, before we wrap up, and we've got 5 whole minutes, just to say, and thank you for those that have come along today. What questions have you got, or what comments have you got? Any contributions really around what you've been inspired by just in the last 20 minutes or so? What are you thinking? What's been the impact?
Hi, Karen, it's Pamela. I'll take my camera.
Hiya.
Hello, it's Pamela. I've just recently started, as you know, just 2 weeks ago as the engagement and involvement lead for North Cumbria. So I'm really just here to get refreshed and catch up and see what's going on at the minute. And yeah, it's just absolutely vital in the work that we do to make sure we're listening appropriately. So thanks ever so much for the refresher.
Great. And so was there anything there that really felt different to what, maybe your thoughts on things, or anything new, or anything that jars?
No, I think just the importance of making people feel comfortable and trusted to be able to speak and be not just given the set of questions, but to really build that rapport first is it's often half the battle, isn't it? To kind of have people
Yeah.
working with us and know us well before we start asking them the questions that might make a difference.
Sure. And yeah, absolutely. And as I said nearer to the start, that's something as a learning community resource boost, we've been asked a few times specifically to say, well, will you just help us to actually do, to do it? We don't have to have the resource really to go in and do with, but what we can do is obviously provide some resources and support and some help for people to try and create the best possible space. So that's what we're working on at the moment, to do some more of that.
Right.
Great. Any other thoughts? Sometimes it's a bit nerve-wracking to speak up. So if you want to pop anything in the chat, any feedback at all, that's really helpful to us. We have got an evaluation which that will pop in the chat as well. I just wanted to signpost you in the last couple of minutes to those modules that I talked to you about around working with communities. If you like what you've heard today and want to know more, we've got four modules around working with communities. So we've got one which is the essentials. You don't have to go to all of them, so you can pick and choose. They're online sessions, a couple of hours each. One's mobilising community assets, one's growing a community-focused organisational culture, and the last one is community power in decision making. So, and the link's on the end of the presentation. Scott, I see you got your hand up there.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I think it was a fantastic presentation. Thing I was really interested in there that I hadn't really considered that was so important was you were talking about, your own mindset when you're going into this. And I have looked at the sort of outward mindset, theory and things like that. That was quite, inspirational. That this is how our teams should be leading and thinking about that, and how that were. I then did a project that looked at, I think it was a Kobe, where he's talking around interdependent working. It was kind of the same thing, and how we would get that to actually, how would actually get that to work within our teams and within our organizations, and then actually with our patients as well. I think that's the hardest thing that we've always sort of thought would work really well, but then we've never really managed to get it to actually happen. So I think this is so important, isn't it? Because it's only by talking about it and practicing it and sharing what we've done that we can actually make it work as a proper sort of co-produced service. So that was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for the feedback. And I think it's to think about our own mental models, because we're institutionalized, whether we like it or not, when we work for the NHS or other potential health and care organizations, around the language that we use in meetings and how we talk together and stuff like that. So it's about challenging ourselves to say, actually, even at the point of, we do a lot of virtual calls, don't we, at the moment? How do you come on and say, okay, I'm not going to introduce myself in a hierarchical way, I'm the head of this, I'm responsible for that, but actually, this is me and this is what's important to me relative to what we're going to talk about today, because that's what we want to do. We want to be real. We want to say, actually, what part are we really playing in the work that we do? So, and if we can really notice our own language, I think that's just such a massive start, isn't it? Because I've been in the NHS 8 years, and there's still a million things every day I don't understand when somebody says something. So yeah, good point. Brilliant. So we're going to wrap up now, and just that last slide there is really about, what we're really proud of is we have a real diverse repertoire in our lunch and learns. Some of them are more clinically focused, some of them are less clinically focused, some of them are around leadership and so on. So if there's anything that you feel that you might like to contribute, then please do get in touch. But thank you for coming along today. We've recorded the session, and we'll put the session on the Boost website as well, so you can signpost other people to it if you think there are colleagues that might find it helpful. So thanks again. Have a good rest of the day.